When the HOA called my fishing boat an eyesore, I never thought I'd end up owning the keys to the whole marina that powered their yacht club dreams. But here I am, standing with a set of rattling locks in my hand, watching their million-dollar yachts trapped behind a chain-link fence, while the board members who once tried to fine me into bankruptcy are howling on the other side, staring at the man they tried to run out of town. You hear that metallic clank. That's the sound of poetic justice, and I've never heard anything sweeter. Now, maybe you've never been pushed to war over something as harmless as a 20-foot fishing boat, but you might know what it's like to deal with people who believe rules don't apply to them, only to you. I didn't come looking for a fight. All I wanted was peace and a sunrise view after a messy divorce and 2 decades fixing Coast Guard cutters. When my Uncle Hank left me his waterfront place in Millbrook Shores, Florida, I thought my luck had finally turned a dock to call my own a boat that had seen more storms than most folks see traffic lights and a quiet stretch of water to help me stitch my life back together. Millbrook Shores looked like the kind of community where the biggest drama ought to be, whether red snapper or biting, but I'd barely had time to repaint the dock when Priscilla Weatherford rolled up clipboard in hand, sunglasses worth more than my outboard, and a smile as sharp as a hurricane warning. 8 years in charge, realtor by trade, she policed property values like the IRS chases back taxes. And in her mind, my Boston whaler wasn't a boat, it was a personal insult to her vision for the neighborhood. It started with a certified letter unsightly marine vessel. They wanted the rusty anchor gone in 30 days or I'd owe $200 a day. Now my boat was legal and cleaner than half the kitchens on my street, but I figured, hey, grown-ups can talk this out. So I went to the next HOA meeting, rookie mistake. The place reeked of burnt coffee and quiet terror. Priscilla held court at the head of the table, tapping those blood-red nails, smiling like she was listing my house for foreclosure. Community standards, she said, must be maintained. I could tell from the way she said lifestyle, she didn't mean boats, she meant me. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just after my fishing boat, she was after anyone who didn't fit her perfect HOA picture. The way people shrank in those metal chairs, eyes glued to the floor, you'd think she was passing out pink slips instead of parking warnings. I wasn't her first target, just her first one willing to fight back. So she dialed up the pressure. My boat fines doubled, and suddenly every car that stopped at my house, even the pizza guy, got parking violations. When that didn't break me, she called the county claiming I was running a commercial fishing business from home. Next thing I know, I'm explaining to an inspector why my operation consists of me and a busted thermos. She figured paperwork and scare tactics would send me packing, but 20 years of military bureaucracy teaches you to check every line, every form, every trick. So I spent my evenings in the courthouse basement, the air thick with dust and frustration, digging through property records until my eyes blurred. That's where I struck gold. Turns out Uncle Hank hadn't just left me the house and dock, he'd left me what they call riparian rights, permanent bulletproof water access the HOA couldn't touch. And get this, he'd never signed away his rights at the marina. In fact, old easement agreements meant my place had privileges at the marina no one else did. But the real twist, my neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, 78, and sharp as a tack, had been keeping her own dossier on Priscilla's leadership. She invited me in for coffee and unloaded a pile of notes thicker than a crime novel. That woman's been terrorizing families for years, she whispered, rattling off names of folks who'd been forced out for things like planting vegetables or playing music on weekends. She'd seen Priscilla coming from a mile away and was more than ready to help bring her down. I started documenting everything, every violation notice, every conversation, every suspicious glance, through her designer shades. My evidence stack was thick, and soon I realized this was bigger than my boat. It was about the kind of place Millbrook Shores was becoming. But Priscilla wasn't backing off. She called another emergency meeting, waving safety hazard reports about my boat like she was testifying before Congress. Then she yanked my parking privileges, whispered in every ear that I was a dangerous, unstable veteran, and basically tried to poison the well. I was the villain in her story, and she was determined to make it stick. But while she was busy with smear campaigns, I was getting busy too, showing up at county meetings, documenting environmental violations at the marina, and with the help of Dr. Martinez from the Environmental Protection Group, building a case that put the yacht club's perfect reputation in the crosshairs. Turns out the marina wasn't just exclusive, it was polluting the water, running on fraudulent environmental permits, and collecting rent on land the HOA didn't actually own. See, the biggest bombshell was buried in a dusty safety deposit box property surveys from the 1960s, showing that not only did I own my dock, I also owned the underwater parcels at the marina's entrance. In other words, you couldn't get in or out without crossing my land. For 15 years, the marina had been paying the HOA for the right to use my property rent they were never entitled to collect. It was time to go on offense. I called in reinforcements. David Bennett, Mrs. Bennett's nephew, and a shark of a maritime lawyer, plus Dr. Martinez, who came armed with contamination reports that read like an EPA indictment. Mrs. Bennett rallied other neighbors, and Rebecca Torres, a local reporter hungry for a scandal, saw the whole story for what it was, a showdown between ordinary people and a dictator with a clipboard. When Priscilla's lawyers realized my paperwork was airtight, her support collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. Meanwhile, I started installing a fence perfectly legal, precisely placed to lock down the marina's entrance. By the time the yacht club realized what was happening, their boats were trapped. The next morning, the marina was a parking lot full of expensive toys and very nervous owners. The HOA screamed, threatened, and called every official in the book, but my documentation was bulletproof. Priscilla tried everything. Called me a terrorist, tried to have me committed. Even spread rumors about sabotage. But the more desperate she got, the more people turned against her. The sheriff came by, saw my permits, shook his head, and left. Mrs. Bennett's silent witnesses folder grew by the day as neighbors handed over evidence of years of selective enforcement and fraud. It all came to a head at the next public meeting, televised live with the room packed wall to wall. Priscilla ranted about outside agitators and forged documents. But when I dropped the property surveys on the table and Dr. Martinez laid out the environmental violations, the room erupted. Residents told their own stories, kids forced out families, driven away playgrounds, left to rot while yacht club dues soared. That night, Priscilla melted down in front of 3 TV crews, accused me of being a criminal, and stormed out for good. Within days, she resigned her real estate license under investigation, her marriage falling apart. The marina management came crawling for new lease terms. The yacht club paid for cleanup rather than face federal charges. Mrs. Bennett was elected HOA president in a landslide and set up oversight committees to keep things transparent. The place came alive, families at the marina, kids learning to fish, the laughter of a real community finally echoing over the water. And me, I started a scholarship for Coast Guard families funded by marina revenues that used to line yacht club pockets. Property values soared, new families moved in, and folks who'd left over Priscilla's bullying came home to find a neighborhood that actually cared. Even the EPA used our story as a model for environmental reform. These days, I sip coffee on my dock watching the rusty anchor rock on clean water surrounded by neighbors instead of enemies. There's no sweeter sound than the laughter of kids fishing where silence used to be demanded, and no better proof that sometimes, just sometimes, justice really does win. So what about you? Got your own HOA nightmare? Drop your story below. I bet you're not alone. And if you enjoyed watching the bully get her comeuppance, hit that subscribe and stick around for the next chapter, because trust me, there's always another HOA showdown just around the bend.